Discipline and Punish is a writing about the history of the modern penal system. It was written by Michael Foucault in 1975. It analyzes punishment in its social context and examines how changing power relations affected that punishment, beginning with before the 18th century and when cruel types of punishment like public executions and torture were commonplace. First, we'll start with this question: who is Michael Foucault? Paul Michael Foucault was a French historian and philosopher. Not only was he a historian and a philosopher, but he was also very active in politics, being involved in a wide range of different protests, including protests against racism, and the Vietnam War. Along with that, he was also a professor of philosophy and psychology at the University of Clermont-Ferrand. When Michael Foucault was still a student, Friedrich Nietzsche influenced him greatly. Nietzsche was a German philosopher. Foucault actually gave Nietzsche credit for freeing him from the prison of Hegelian philosophy and the existentialism and Marxism of another philosopher. Foucault has written many different books and pieces while he was still alive. Some of his most major works were Histories of Madness in the Classical Age, which was a book inspired by Foucault's research and archival work and his anger at what he saw as the moral hypocrisy of modern psychiatry. Another one of his major works was the book The Order of Things, but the one we would like to focus on is Discipline and Punish. Like I said before, Discipline and Punish was published in 1975 and is about the history of the modern penal system, especially that of Western civilization. In this work, there are four parts, four main ideas that come into play. They are torture, punishment, discipline, and prison. These are the things that we're going to focus on. Torture played a considerable part of penalty. It was a method of revealing the truth and has been used since ancient times. There were two elements to torture, the first being an investigation by judicial authority, which was done in secret, and second was a ritual act by the accused. The body of the accused linked both of these elements. Punishment is another big part of penalty. Attitudes toward punishment were related to general attitudes toward the body and death. Death as a punishment was so familiar because of war and sickness, which is why it has survived as a punishment for such a long time. Eventually, people started to condemn this kind of punishment and look towards something more humane. Discipline is one of the forms of punishment that developed from the emergence of prisons in Foucault's eyes. Discipline created more functional men, which was ideal, especially in the modern age for economics, politics, and warfare, but discipline didn't come on its own, hence prisons. Prisons evolved to become a large part of the modern society. When we think prison, we think jail, but Foucault actually sees many more things than just jail, including schools, hospitals, and factories. These things are part of the vast network of prisons. They help to create some sort of discipline. Through all four of these ideas, there is this underlying method of efficiency and control. At the very core of Foucault's modern picture of discipline, there are three primary techniques of control: hierarchical observation, normalizing judgment, and examination. In the section that we read for discussion, there was actually this idea of hierarchical observation. First off were the syndics, then the intendants, and then the mayor or the magistrates and the plague. This relay makes observation easy for the passing of information up the chain, almost like a pyramid. This is all part of having control or power over the people. Normalizing judgment has to do with social norms. When observation fails the system of control, there needs to be this fail-safe. Norms are much like a test score. It is a standard someone should be at or above. When these norms aren't met, i.e. crime, this is where modern disciplinary systems come into play to correct the behavior in question. Examination is actually the method of bringing the previous two ideas, hierarchical observation and normalizing judgment, together into something Foucault calls power knowledge. It combines into one group the deployment of force and establishment of truth. All of these ideas, the ideas of discipline, control, prisons, they all culminate into one idea. We've all heard Dr. Komati say it many times before. It is the panopticon. Foucault discusses the idea of the panopticon. Jeremy Bentham's panopticon extensively. The panopticon for Foucault is the ideal architectural model of modern disciplinary power. This design for a prison is efficient and a little creepy. On page 200, Foucault explains this idea as this: a large building or area overlooked by a tower, but not just any tower, it's more of an observation tower. The inhabitants of the panopticon are then separated into cells in which the cellmate is always visible, and the supervisors of the cells are unpredictable, and visibility is the cellmate's vulnerability. The major effect of the panopticon is to induce in the inmate a state of conscious and permanent visibility that assures the automatic functioning of power, so to arrange things that the surveillance is permanent in its effects, even if it is discontinuous in action. It induces a paranoia. Remember, Foucault not only sees prisons as prisons, but other establishments as well. Schools, hospitals, factories are included in this. Not only are they prisons, they could also be panopticons. The Ford Rouge plant is actually a good example of this, with catwalks that a supervisor can observe the workers on and look around and whatnot. Even more modern and applicable to everyday life than a factory is social media. Think of Facebook or Twitter. You could view those as panopticons. You are always visible, and you never know when someone is looking at your profile. Panopticons are everywhere. Foucault argues that more sophisticated societies offer greater opportunities for control and observation. He assures that modern society is based on the idea that all citizens are free and entitled to make certain demands on the state. This ideology developed in the 18th century, along with the techniques of control he described. Foucault also argues that political ideals cannot be understood without mechanisms that control and examine the citizen, and it spreads throughout society. Schools, factories, and hospitals and prisons resemble each other not in their looks, but how they examine and classify people and try to make them conform to the social norm.